Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Best on Wellbeing podcast. I'd like to return to the idea of affirmations. We discussed a few episodes ago about the affirmation, I thank you for everything, I have no complaints, and the power of that, to repeat that to ourselves on a regular basis. I've been interested lately about the idea of sort of programming our mind or subconscious mind to affect how we perceive our reality. And that the role of affirmations is to kind of structure our minds in a certain way so that the lens by which we perceive day to day life uh, can be viewed in a certain way. And so I've been playing with a new affirmation that I wanted to share on this podcast. And it's very simply this: life is effortless. Life is effortless. And I've been, telling myself this sort of affirmation many, many times a day. And in my view is if I can keep my mind quiet and, be still, as we've talked about in this podcast many times, then that's good. And if I feel like my mind needs to say something, then I try to focus on the affirmations. Life is effortless. Now, initially, people listening to this, or this idea for many people can be almost a sense of resistance, because life is seem for a lot of people like, my life is lots of effort, and I've got a lot of things to do. And that's been a little bit of why I decided to really work on this affirmation called that is life is effortless, and do that over and over again, is because I started to realize, I've shared a little bit about this challenge on this podcast for me, but, part of what I find challenging in this current stage of my life is just uh, you know, the amount of actions on a day-to-day basis, and the amount of things to do and take care of, and responsibilities to attend to. And sometimes the story in my head of effort begins to affect how I feel about my reality. It can arise as a negative emotion. It's like, oh, there's so much effort to do every day. Effort, effort, effort. And so starting to notice that I even though if it's not going to change necessarily my responsibilities, the things I need to take care of and all that, but that if I can impact the way I perceive all that, then this is going to help my well-being. So I've been working on this idea of life is effortless. And I do find it's been very helpful, because when you look at life itself, the grass grows and the trees grow their leaves in the spring, and the earth orbits around the sun and rotates on its own axis to create the days and the nights, and all the wonderful, wonderful intricacies of reality that exist all around us. I mean, immense amount of things are occurring around us all the time. Your own body, your digestive system, your immune system, your heartbeat, your breathing, so many things are occurring effortlessly every day. The grass grows without effort, if you will. And the majority of our body functions are occurring constantly without our effort. And so the idea of effort is its own sort of mental construct. Now, obviously, when we see a situation that might require we could use different terminology, a lot of work, we could say, a lot of actions, then we can start to build a story in our head of like, oh, that's going to be a lot of effort. It's going to be a lot of work, a lot of effort. I don't really want to do it, or whatever. And it becomes this thing in our heads that just draws on our energy and gives us a certain resistance to the action that's before us. But when we start to really remind ourselves over and over again, life is effortless, then something, at least from my experience so far, that can happen is then it becomes about more, it helps you go into the moment. Because again, we discussed a lot about like the affirmation, I have no complaints. And why that's important is because a lot of our mental narrative is built around complaining. So when we affirm that we have no complaints, it creates a lot more mental quietness. And when there's more mental quietness, we tend to feel better. Well, when we start to affirm life is effortless, it's not to deny there are actions to take, there are things to look after, there are responsibilities to honor, and there are many tasks ahead of us, perhaps. But the way in which we look at the task, when you start to really think about life as effortless, it's kind of funny what starts to shift. Because I'll give you a very simple example. A few nights ago, or let's say 2 weeks ago, um, you know, my wife was working a full shift, and then I had to do quite a few rides for the children and doing this and that. And then I get home, and the lunches need to be made for the next day, and it's like the lunches. So you do the lunches, you get them done. You're kind of doing reluctantly and begrudgingly a little bit, and you get them done. Okay, and then it feels like effort. And then for the last 2 weeks or so, that shift sort of happening within me, and just to start of life is effortless. Life is effortless. And then all of a sudden, the same sort of scenario happens where, my spouse is working, lots of things to do in the evening. Things are finally settling down, and like, oh, lunches need to be made. Okay. But then when you tune into this moment, which is where life exists, then all of a sudden it's like, is putting mayonnaise on a sandwich really hard? Because when you break down life into this moment, whatever this moment is requiring is usually quite effortless. Like, it's not actually hard to put mayonnaise on a piece of bread and then, to turn around and open a fridge. That's pretty effortless. And then it starts to almost become this game that you notice that what seems like a task that requires effort, if you break it down to what's ahead of you exactly in this moment, it becomes almost a silly thing. Like, I take a piece of bread out of the bread bag. Okay, like that was pretty effortless, and so all these actions. So when they become, you realize how much the idea of effort and like this sense of heaviness is a very mental construct. And the point of affirming over and over again, life is effortless, is to kind of undo this construct. And, we can have resistance, but it is effort. It takes effort to, I kind of have a little bit of my own programming of like, it is effort. You got to work hard in life. You got to, you got to give it all you got. And I don't deny all those things, that people who pursue excellence in different fields of sports and science and arts, that they've put a tremendous amount of work into mastering their art. And that's an awesome thing. And I applaud that. So I'm not trying to move away from the idea that we have to apply ourselves in life. We have to apply ourselves if we want to have excellence and we want to express competence in our day-to-day lives. So applying ourselves is important. But the idea of effort is its own mental idea that just weighs heavy. And when we can affirm over and over, life is effortless, then it kind of starts to tune in the brain of how in this moment, what's the effort? You got this one little thing I got to do. Okay, that was effortless. And then next it's like, oh, do that thing. And then it's effortless. And it moves us away from perceiving a bigger scenario and our imaginations of it and all the things we're going to have to do and da 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 da. Because it's okay to feel like life is effortless. It doesn't need to be heavy and tough all the time. It can be light and joyful and effortless. But it takes, I think the idea of affirmations is that you sort of hypnotize yourself a little bit. You program yourself to really start to believe that life is like that. Now, it doesn't take away the fact that there's going to be challenges. There's going to be moments where we're more emotional, or something happens that it throws us off, and all these difficulties. The other night, my generator wouldn't go on, and I was so grumpy about the fact that my generator wouldn't turn on when the power went off, and I was trying to get some lights going in the house, and and yeah, it was challenging to bring myself back to this concept of life is effortless when the generator's not working. It was not easy. So it's not to make it too rosy. Life is always effortless. And I'm again not faux positivity. This is not about advertising faux positivity. This is about trying to train our minds to perceive life in a way that truly makes us more light, and that our well-being increases, that we more naturally flow into gratitude and enjoyment of our day-to-day lives. So, and putting our little ego aside, because part of us, no, but I get what you're saying, Guillaume, but life is hard, you got to really go for it. If, sometimes it's just not easy. We have to make sacrifices, Okay, but that's a perception of the mind, so sometimes our own egoic patterns, or our own ego, our own pride, or wants to hold on to the idea of effort, wants to hold on that we're a little bit of a victim of what life demands of us, that it's effort and it's not easy, and sometimes we get beat up, and that's the way it is. I don't deny challenges. I don't deny that some people have gone through very difficult things. This is the work. I work in mental health. I'm very exposed to that. But I'm talking about my own personal inner experience and how to align myself with life in a way that brings a sense of lightheartedness and relaxation while remaining applied and dedicated to doing my very best in whatever I have to take care of. But affirming over and over, life is effortless, and to absorb the truth that all the things that make life possible do seem to occur effortlessly all around us. That's not a crazy thing to say. And that I am life too. I am not separate from life. There's not life and then there's me. Eckhart Tolle talks about it. We don't have a life. We are life. So if all these things around me are occurring effortlessly, then that life that flows, the same life that flows through me is also flowing effortlessly. And it's a more question of alignment and structuring my mind to be in alignment with that life is effortless. So I encourage you folks who are open to this idea to try this affirmation. We've looked at 2 affirmations, and I really feel that if you apply yourselves every day to affirming these things in your mind again and again and again, I thank you for everything. I have no complaints. And then maybe a bit later, life is effortless. And doesn't mean you don't have challenges, doesn't mean you don't have things to take care of, doesn't mean you don't have to apply yourself to certain tasks that require a certain dedication. So all those, no, but perhaps the way you will interface or interact with those experiences might shift just a little bit, and find your well-being increases a little more. That's it for today, folks. Thank you very much. If you like this podcast, please share it. Give me a like, give me a follow, and we'll catch you next time.